welcome to another episode of our Superintendent Sit Down with the one and only Dr. White. We are excited to be here with you all. We did complete another round of teacher advisory yesterday. It was really great. We also did our Elliott walkthroughs, and as a reminder, that is for our accreditation process, and it's been a really fun experience having all of our teachers of the year go into different areas and kind of just observing all of the great things that are happening. And speaking of great things, we are being recognized on the national level, Dr. White. And it's all because of you all and the work that you put into our classrooms. And be on the lookout for some celebration that will be coming to you soon. But congratulations, and really, take a lot of pride in that because that's a great job. Yes. Just a couple of questions that were submitted that I want to go over briefly before Dr. White takes some time to explain more in detail. But to be more efficient, we don't want to take too much of your time today. So the first question was about pre-K, and since school starts in August, is there any consideration to move the cutoff date? And this question says September 15th to August 15th. Dr. Laura Timberlake, who is over our federal programs and our pre-K program, she specified that it's actually September 1st is the cutoff date. And unfortunately, that is put into place by DECALS, which is our state pre-K program. That is separate from Floyd County Schools. That is a state program, and they put that stipulation into place. The next question, why do we have to make up weather days when the governor declares a state of emergency? Dr. White explained yesterday that we have several classified non-exempt employees who are needed for those days to go in and check the buildings to see if there was a water leak, if the roof has caved in, if there's any damage inside or outside the buildings that have happened in the past that need immediate attention. So we do ask those individuals to come in and make sure our schools are still in place and properly able to go back to when the weather is over. So with that, it's really hard to to manage and just oversee one group of classified employees and not another one. So everyone is asked to make up that time. And as far as certified teachers and staff, that is simply just logging the hours that you already do, as great as you are, grading papers, showing up for students, conferences after hours, just logging those hours. Has there been discussion on lack of substitutes? Miss Stacey Hardy mentioned yesterday, there's always a discussion in that. Kind of like what we see everywhere. No one really wants to work these days and put a lot of effort in that. And when we ask people to come take care of our children, we want those to be great individuals who are giving our students the opportunities when you're not there. So there has been discussion on that. She did point out that we do pay them $100 a day.
Yes.
Plus there is a 33% markup.
It is, and actually that comes out of the 100.
Okay.
So.
That we have to pay the ESS program that does give us our subs. However, Ms. Gretchen Brock at the CCA and Teaching Pathway mentioned yesterday that they've partnered with us recently, and she is allowing the ESS to come in and train her seniors to be sub-ready and trained when they graduate, so they can help begin subbing as soon as they graduate for grades pre-K through 8th grade. And we've already had several take advantage of that. And so that's another great opportunity that will help with that. So yes, always discussing that. If you guys have input, please let Ms. Hardy know. She was very open to that yesterday. The next question, what is the rule on spouses being in a supervisory position with their spouse being housed in the same position? Simply put, an employee cannot directly report to their spouse.
That's right.
And Dr. White used the example yesterday. His wife is Miss Jennifer White, who is the elementary math coach, and her direct report is Mr. John Parker. Dr. White has no say or control in her evaluations. Any issues that she may have, that is directly to Mr. John Parker.
That's right. Yes.
And then the last question two more questions before we get into Dr. White's explanation and detail questions. Could we partner with schools like West Georgia for an EDD program similar to what we did with Barry? Mr. Jason Brock said, absolutely, we are looking and always looking for different partnerships like that will better help give our teachers and staff more opportunity. The one with Barry was a little different, as they worked with Floyd County and was able to bring down the price to where we were able to pay half of that and fund that. And that was a 2-year cohort agreement. That would not necessarily look the same for any future programs, but working to negotiate a better price and maybe even seeing if they would come here and let our teachers do it at the central office in one location. Different avenues in that nature are definitely worth exploring. And I know Mr. Jason Brock is always communicating with local universities for that for our teachers. And then the last question was about school safety. Where are we with that, and where are we with Centegix? With Centegix is that program for like the panic alert buttons. And Dr. White shared yesterday, we have been in talks with him several times. The guy just called him the other day about it. At this time, that is not in the funding for Floyd County Schools, because Dr. White stresses the importance of being proactive versus reactive. And what does he mean by that? We have spent additional funds, specifically in the last 9 to 10 months, on school safety and resources. We've increased the supplement and salary for SROs and having additional police officers. So you all should have and should see police officers there daily, interacting with your school, with your students, walking the buildings and being there as that hedge of protection. Also, we are looking at, and hopefully relatively soon, getting dogs that can sniff out weapons and THC. That has been tested. We're working with our Floyd County Police Department. That is another tool of proactive that we can do for school safety. Now, if the governor and the federal government is willing, and they're looking into it, correct?
Yes.
To give more money to schools for school safety, and it is a feasible opportunity for our school system, that may be something we look at adding in addition to all the other steps that have been taken into place. So that is where we are there. Okay, Dr. White, I want to spend the last few minutes talking to you about 2 topics. The first one being allotment. Now, allotment happens every year. That is not something that just started this year, despite what a recent article may have suggested. That is something that we do every year.
Yes, it is.
And look at a lot of different factors. One main thing being enrollment. Can you please explain that allotment process and some of the effects that come with that?
Yes, and this year I was involved in every school as far as allotment goes, and that gets into number of teachers matching up with the number of our students. And we have had a decrease in some of our schools in enrollment, which then resulted in a decrease in the number of teachers for that school. And I'm going to mention specifically Model High School. They dropped enrollment, and so because of that, they lost several teachers. Now, let me explain when I say lost. No one is losing their job. They will be transferred to other positions that are open inside our school system. So it is not a RIF or anything like that. RIF being reduction in force. It's actually, we're just placing them into other schools where we have open positions.
So it's reallocation. It is not cuts.
No.
It's reallocation through retirements, transfers,
Yes.
and that nature. Okay.
Yes, retirement, or someone may decide they have to move, or the family had to move, take a job somewhere, something like that. But it is not a RIF. It's just, like I like what you said, a reallocation of our employees, and then we put them where the open positions are.
Speaking of RIF, Dr. White, I know you have said this many of times, and it was a topic of conversation in the last couple of months. RIF in Floyd County Schools, what is your thought on that? Do you foresee that under your leadership?
No, there will be no RIF under my leadership as superintendent. And the reason there's not going to be is because we're going to take these moves now as enrollment drops and as our teacher allotment drops, and then through attrition, not through eliminating a job as far as eliminating a person, but through attrition when they retire or they move or whatever, then we're going to plug those people into those positions. So there will be no RIF while I am superintendent. We're not even close to that right now, but I'm looking 4 or 5 years out. I want to be that far ahead to make sure that we're not in a RIF. 2013, when you mentioned that around people that were here in 2013, that was not a pleasant time for us.
And it's just like you do in your personal lives, in your everyday life. You have to plan and save for, you know, a rainy day or whatnot. And that's simply what this is, especially within allotment meetings. And making those changes now and absorbing where we can and spending efficiently and effectively.
Yes.
So with allotment and changes, when you reallocate positions, what are some, I guess, things that are looked at when moving teachers and asking them to go to a different grade level, maybe a different campus?
Yes.
What goes into that?
Now that is when we actually get into moving teachers from school A to school B. And then factors that are involved in that would be things like, do they coach sports? Are they involved in whatever sports coaching? And if I move that person, do we lose a coach? So we look at those things. Are they AP gifted certified, dual enrollment certified? Even things like, do they have a CDL to drive a bus?
Right.
All these things will be factored into that. And so the people that are critical to the functioning of a school, I'm not going to move. But if they're like, okay, well, I don't do any of that, and then they may have coached at some point in time and they don't do that anymore, the priority will go with keeping the school functional. And so that is when we start moving those people who are less impactful, I guess I would say, as far as what goes on in that specific
Outside of the classroom per se
Yes.
and running the school. So it's not necessarily just anyone who has 29 years or 30 years in that that whoever is saying, oh, you've got to move. You're looking at a bigger picture.
Yes. And once again, what makes the school function?
Right.
And then that's when, especially with high schools, we have to have coaches and we have athletic programs and those kind of things. But I also emphasize the dual enrollment, AP certification, gifted certification. Those are things that our teachers can get that make them more valuable to that school and to our school system.
And so with the enrollment and allotment conversation, there seems to be a concern about class size and being significantly larger, and how would that affect, day-to-day in the classroom. And I really like what Dr. Timberlake shared yesterday. There is a formula that's used, and enrollment drives that formula. And a lot of different schools, based off their needs and what they offer, have different ways. But she said in that formula for this year, the class size number that they use to determine max capacity, I guess, did not change for this formula.
The formula hasn't changed, but I'm going to be transparent here because we had some classes where there are 10 or 12 kids or maybe even 8, and we're not going to be able to do that. So as I thought more about that, if some of our teachers are like, well, I had a class with 8, no, I'm sorry, we're not going to be able to do that.
Right.
And so we're looking at those situations. So if they're saying, well, I have one with 20, yes, probably you will have one with 20. But the class size numbers for our school are, in my opinion, and based on research in other school systems, our class sizes are small. And I know our teachers are like, well, I don't think that. Well, I'm just giving you the information here because if you look at the class size for Ford County schools and compare it to other school systems, we're in a lot better shape than they are. But once again, I think that's perspective on how you see what class size is.
Well, and to that point, you kind of hope, based off this conversation, that the class sizes do go crazy big because enrollment drives teachers. And so that would help with that as well. So.
Well, we want to attract more kids to us. We want more students. We were in a meeting, or not a meeting, but just kind of informal conversation out at Armory Elementary School because they were talking about houses being built, and one of my reaction was, I hope so. I hope we get more children to come to us. We would love to have that problem.
Yes, absolutely. The more the merrier. And the last question, Dr. White, that I want to spend a few minutes talking and discussing is school funding. I know we've talked about this already in a previous podcast, but specifically yesterday the question was asked, we're having to be careful as far as personnel and school resources, considering recent HB 581 decisions and just the future of economics and the economy as it is, and being just smarter with our money. However, there was a discussion at the board meeting and in the paper about looking at and discussing possibly building another building at 2 of our campuses.
Yes.
So the question is, how is that possible? Why is that a thing? Or how does that happen?
Okay, so and school finance can be confusing. Let's start with that. So here's what we're into. The East SPLOST, which is Education Special Purpose Local Option Sales Tax, And I love what Star Smith did in a conversation we had with the paper the other day. She said, well, it's like when you go to the grocery store and every dollar you spend on buying groceries, there's a penny that goes into that SPLOST package, which comes to us. Now, that penny is actually split between Rome City schools and Floyd County schools, but we get the majority of it because we're the larger school system. It is based on population. So that money goes into our eSPLOST account, and that can be used for facilities, building facilities, just like we've talked about at Pepperell High and Model High, and that's what the money's for. It can be used on buses, technology, school safety, all those kind of buying textbooks, which we don't buy that many textbooks anymore, but it can be used for, you know, computer programs that are the same thing as textbooks now, but it's the same kind of thing. But that's a separate bucket of money compared to property tax, which comes in off of your property tax you pay on your house. Those are two separate things. And so the property tax, that has to go to the daily operations, paying salaries and those kind of things. And then we get QBE funding, Quality Basic Education Act funding from the state of Georgia. That also contributes to that. And we have federal funding that comes from the federal government. So all these things go together, but the SPLOST, the eSPLOST money is for those kind of projects that we've designated, like at Model and Pepperell. That's where that money goes.
And buying recent buses, and I think looking at for the dogs that we're looking to implement.
Yes, this what goes back to school safety. We can spend that on the dogs and the training of the dogs and all the equipment that goes with that.
It cannot be paid for bonuses or salary or personnel or benefits. That is why it's important for the local funds to be available.
Yes, none of that can be used for that. And then I really think we need to probably talk about this more, not only with our teachers, but with our parents so they can see. And there's an article in the paper this morning about this. So I hope people will read that because it did a pretty good job of explaining why these things are different, why there are two different pots of money here that we're looking at.
And I'm working on a visual as well for that and with STAR and hopefully sending that out to our parents and our teachers. But for the eSPLOST, if you don't use that money, you lose it. Is that correct, or how does that work?
I'm not for sure about losing it, but I can tell you that we're going to spend it.
Well, you have it, right.
So we're going to spend it because that's what the people of Floyd County and Rome City voted for. So we're going to use that money. And I want to say this to our teachers and people in the community, thank you so much for doing that, because if they haven't voted for this, we wouldn't have things like we have right now. We wouldn't have turf football fields. We wouldn't have buildings like a new weight room at Armurchie High School or a new field house at Armurchie High or a new field house at Coosa High. We wouldn't have those things. So I am so appreciative of our people, our parents, our teachers, people in Floyd County who vote for this, because without it, we wouldn't have it. Now, one other thing about the SPLOST, eSPLOST, it's the same thing. The E means it goes for education. But here's the thing, and they've done the research on this, 40% of that money approximately comes from outside Floyd County with people coming in to spend money here. So what better way to do that than to have other people besides us pay for it?
Right. And without it, I mean, we wouldn't, it goes from the top up and top down or whatever. We wouldn't have been able to get more SRO help, safety, technology. So two separate pots. It cannot fund personnel, teachers, resources in that manner. So thank you for that. I think that is all, unless you have something else you want to add.
Yes, I do want to say this. And the article is on the front page of the Rome News today, and it talks about the research from Harvard and Stanford. And guys, this came to us. We didn't go do this research, but it points to the fact of the great success we've had in the last 5 years in the Floyd County school system. It points to what our teachers, administrators, our students, parents, everyone has done to give us success over the last 5 years. So I really appreciate that from our staff, students, administrators, the whole group. Thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you so much.
Let's see it.